Hey guys, welcome back to Book Talk. Today I'm going to be talking again about The Custodians. And I've been enjoying the book, but I've also been feeling like, wow, this is a lot of alien information. So I'm like, now I'm like trickling through it a little bit slower than I was in the beginning because it's like a lot of like stories of people being taken and all those things. And I've been jotting down tidbits of things that I want to talk about and like visit and kind of maybe extend with things that called my attention that have to do with the Akashic Records as well, or things that I've learned from the Akashic Records. So I have my notes here. And the first thing that I jotted down to talk about today is it seems like there's these scenarios. This doesn't seem to happen to all the people in the book, but it seems like there's a scenario that happens to a few people where they're about to have an experience like those entities, those individuals, the aliens that are about to come and either work with the person, grab the person, take them somewhere. Before that happens, it's like the peripheral of the person's vision. It's like they see shadows. And I jotted that down because I thought it reminded me of I once read, have you guys ever read the books Ed and Lorraine Warren? There was an era where I wanted to read about those scenarios and see. Ed and Lorraine Warren, for those that don't know, Ed and Lorraine Warren were these demonologists. So, which I'm pretty sure they both passed away already. Ed was a demonologist, and then Lorraine was also, but she was a psychic or sensitive, so she was able to kind of perceive things as well. And they would go into houses that had poltergeists or hauntings, and they would record it. They would try to get evidence. They would try to experience it themselves so they can like validate it, and then they would try to help the person clean out the house or fix the issues that they were having. So when I read this in this book about individuals who were under hypnosis reliving the scenario, and it seems like some of these people, before the scenario happened, before like the aliens fully came into the picture, into the room, they were seeing shadows from their peripherals. And I thought, oh my goodness, I remember Ed and Lorraine's books talked about this. Like it was a common thing for when it was evil. Well, they had in their books that it was when it was evil energy, the person would see a lot of it, the action from the peripheral, but they weren't seeing it from the front of their eye. So they would see like a shadow figure walk by and things like that. And so I stopped for a second. I thought about it. I was like, wait, because I know these aliens aren't, I mean, not all aliens are good, but not all aliens are bad. So we know it's not because it's not a demon or a negative energy thing. So I started to think about it a second. I think it's a dimensional thing, because what I understand from the Akashic Records is that we're like the lower density, like we're incarnated in human form, and human beings are stuck in this 3 to 4D. So we're transferring into 4D energy, vibration, and so we're dense. And most of the planets that are around us that have life forms, those life forms don't have that lower density that we have to carry. That's why we always feel heavy, and gravity really affects us, and like our weight issues, and like that's all has to do with the density. That's why it makes it so hard for souls. Like imagine an expansive soul that's so, able to go anywhere, do anything. There's barely any limitations for the soul, and then it gets stuck in this 3D body. Like that's why we feel so uncomfortable with our bodies. Sometimes we feel so trapped. And so for me, when I was looking at what they were saying, in my head, what clicked was, yeah, of course, these energies vibrate from another dimension or another vibrational density, and they need to kind of come down to where we are. And I think some of them come with fixers, which is like maybe like there's a suit that helps them stay in the density. I don't know like what their technology is, but I think some of them come with things that help them do that. And I think that before the person has them fully present in their 3 dimension, in this realm that we're living in, I think that our peripherals can catch other dimensions. I think the front of our eyes can't catch it, so the side of our eyes can. Not all the time, but sometimes. And so that's what I think was why Ed and Lorraine were talking about that in the book. I think that the individual that was seeing the movement, the poltergeist, the shadow figures, or whatever they were seeing it from it was another dimensional being, so they could see it from here. And so I think that the person captures the aliens in their around them in their, I guess you could say, space, in their environment, but in another dimension, another vibration, and they spot them from the side. Then once they come into full figure, then those aliens can be seen from the front and from all, turning your head and seeing them from all over. So I thought that was so interesting because it allowed me to do full circle on the whole. It's not just the poltergeist. Like I had read that book so many years ago, and it was like, I always thought it was a low vibrational energy thing, like an entity that kind of comes in with a bad energy and our side can catch it. But now I'm realizing it's just a dimensional thing. So maybe you're seeing something from the side, but that doesn't mean that it's bad. Just don't be scared. That's why I want to make sure you guys don't be scared. I would be scared. It just means that they're vibrating different than us and higher than us. So we, not higher, because like demonic energies aren't necessarily vibrating higher. They're vibrating in another dimension that's not our dimension. I guess it's the best way to describe it. So we live in this really dense, like molecule, like cells, like very dense, tangible 3D thing. And these energies can go through walls and things. Those things don't affect them. So they have another density level. And so our peripheral seems to be able to catch that other density level, but not the front of it, the front of like our focus. Super interesting. Okay. Then I wrote down here, the subconscious remembers encounters like in a dream. It's like a dream comes in and you think it's a dream, but the individual is actually remembering an encounter. And the individual might remember it as something specifically bad or something specifically good. But the dream that you're remembering, the subconscious, okay, so you're going to sleep at night, you're having a dream, and the person seems to have relived a scenario that was one of those alien encounters, for example, and they're specifically relating it to being negative, for example, and actually could have been positive, or they're specifically remembering it as positive and actually could have been negative, because the subconscious might change it up a little bit, and it might not be the same exact scenario. And so there was a whole story about a woman who was thinking that this one scenario for her was a really good one. And it ended up actually not being a such great experience. Like actually, after she relived in hypnosis, it was pretty traumatic, and she decided she wasn't going to do any more hypnosis sessions anymore. That's what they were saying, what she was saying in the book. And so she went to the hypnosis thinking it was going to be a positive experience, and actually was not. And so the subconscious sometimes might hide bad experiences, so it's less traumatic. But then when they go under hypnosis, when Dolores Cannon put her into hypnosis, she obviously remembered the real scenario with all those details. And then she was like, oh, no. Like, I don't even want to relive this. I don't even want to know this. Like, I prefer to stick with what my subconscious was sharing with me, which I think I would I'm kind of like those people, like, I want to know the truth and I love digging for the truth. But at the same time, I'm like, well, if I can continue to enjoy my life and not remember that awful thing over there, maybe I wouldn't go down that rabbit hole for myself. So I kind of understand. I understand that woman. But just know that sometimes you'll have a dream and you're like, oh, I think this is something I lived. Just know that sometimes the subconscious can hide things in it. And that was really interesting to me because we in the Patreon, Lorraine and I have the Patreon, and the Patreon, they had requested for us to do an episode about like dreams and dream states and how to tell the difference between a dream and how to tell the difference between like a past life that you're reliving. And there was this whole part where the Akashic Records were talking about the subconscious and how it can like I don't remember now exactly what I channeled, but it was like, don't trust everything, because the subconscious wants to shed a bunch of stuff or get rid of stuff, and it can grab pieces of things and make things a bit distorted. So I can understand this part of the book, and it ignited something in my brain when I read that, because I was like, oh, interesting how she really thought it was positive and it ended up like not being positive, for example. Another really interesting thing in the book is they talk a lot about this mantis being, right? Like the mantis, like the insect, but these are these beings that are probably taller than us. I'm pretty sure they're big, probably taller than us, and they're coming to pick up the people. And the book is calling them the messengers. And I thought that was really interesting because I've heard quite a few people tell stories And even on the podcast, we had V come on and we interviewed her, and she talked about her experience with a mantis being on one of our podcast episodes. And so I remembered that. And then I remembered other people's story of talking about mantis beings. The things I had heard previously before this book was that they were really intelligent, that they were, I mean, you would think if I saw a massive mantis in front of me, I feel like my LUCIA brain, you know, the character I'm playing, my soul's playing in this lifetime, I feel like I would be really scared or like maybe somewhat frightened, like, a huge insect. Like, I'm already kind of scared of bugs. And like, imagine if a massive bug is in front of me, like bigger than me, I'm like, oh my God. But I hear that a lot of people like have experienced that these mantis beings felt very intelligent, felt very wise, and they felt very calm. And some people would even call them up even loving. So that's obviously my human brain kind of not ready for that. But what was interesting in this book is they called them the messengers, because it seems to be that the mantis beings are the ones that are picking the individuals up, like going into their house, walking them out, like kindly. There's no forcing. Like, it seems to be a really tranquil experience with the mantis beings. And they kind of take them to, for example, the ship, the UFO. And then from there, usually beings more like the Greys or something take over from there. So they're calling them the messengers because they're the ones picking them up. Maybe call them like the taxi Uber drivers for the aliens, for the Greys or something. Like they're going to pick you up and take you to your destination in a way. In one of the scenarios, a mantis being was the messenger that was picking the person up. The person moved on to the ship where there was, I think it was alien, gray beings with some other beings, a few different beings on the ship, and then that ship went somewhere else. But the mantis beings are the ones that did the picking up kind of thing, or going into the house scenario. It's interesting because like that's I've heard this before, and I love watching, for example, Cosmic Disclosure on Gaia, and you'll hear them talk about how it's for them is the aliens don't think it's weird that they can like all of a sudden go to your bedroom and watch you sleep. Like I think about it, I'm like, please don't watch me sleep. That's like creepy. Like, but to them, they don't think it's weird, or they don't think there's a personal boundary being passed. Like it's a human thing. I guess we're the ones that feel like we have our space. Give me my space. Don't pass over this line over here. I feel a little weird if you do. It seems like it's an us thing because it doesn't really seem to happen that much. You don't hear aliens really feeling like they need that or something. It's weird. And then the other thing that is discussed is implants in different places. And so I had heard about implants. I'd heard them in the head. I'd heard about them in like the back of the neck. I had heard them in like a few different places. And in this book, what I've heard for now is arms, brain, nose. So you'll have individuals that are implanted with technology that comes from these different races that are not from Earth originally. And I guess you would say that some of them are tracker devices. So it's like they want to know what the individual is. I feel like they're working with specific individuals. Let's say that the Greys are working with 200 people on Earth. And so that they need to be able to find those 200 people, because they're not going to look for you every other day. They're going to look for you maybe every 5 years or something. And so who knows where you are in 5 years? Maybe you moved countries and towns and cities and houses, and they need to keep track of the individual to find them again and to check up on them. Some of them seems to be like positive checkups. Like there are some stories of individuals going to a spaceship and being healed from like a sickness and then helping them. And there are stories of individuals being taken to a spaceship where it's like awful test scenarios are going on where the person's not very comfortable and it's not really nice. So I think that they're checking the person's bodies, their status. Maybe there's some DNA stuff, testing stuff going on or taking out for them to use. I do think that some souls have contracts, and I've heard this in quite a few places, not just a book, but I do think that some souls have specific contracts where it's like, I'll go and be human, right, for this lifetime, and I give you guys permission to come and take out whatever part of, maybe it's sperm or something, like, so you guys can continue to do your progress with your own race, because the Greys supposedly can't really reproduce anymore. That seems to be a thing for them. Like they made an error, a massive mistake, and now they can't reproduce. And so they're using us in specific parts of us to be able to reproduce for themselves. So they're mixing us with them and creating hybrid species, right? So I think some of those chips are to find people. And I think some of those chips might be to also maybe communicate. I feel like there's some people communicating with them or receiving information directly from them. So some of them might be good light workers that are just have implants so they can be checked up on, and also so they can receive information better. So I think the sky's the limit, really. It probably depends on the race, but there's probably so many different reasons and different types of implants as well, I'm pretty sure. I'm looking to see what other notes I have. I jotted down, yeah, that they seem to find it pretty easy to find people even after many years. That's probably because of the implants, because they were talking about that, like, how do you find people? I think that I also know this one thing from the Akashic Records, which is we all have one specific frequency. Like even your soul like has its own frequency. And then when your soul incarnates in a body, every character it plays, so every past life and this life, every one of those character beings has a different frequency specific to that being that will never be repeated. Like I'm so convinced about that. And the Akashic Records have made me understand that we all have a different frequency, and it's the mix between the physical body and character we're playing in this lifetime with the partial energy of the soul, and that makes a specific frequency that it cannot be repeated. Like if there's not another one just like that, like there's not another energy that vibrates like me, Lucia, or like my sister Lorena, or like my dog or my cat. Like each of those beings has a specifically frequency that's almost like its name in a way, from a frequency formed. And so I think that some of those beings might have the capacity to tune into that frequency and find that individual. I've also heard that the governments already have the ability to do that. I don't know if that's true, but I've heard some theories about that. I thought that's interesting. Maybe they got that technology from aliens. Apparently we have like these scenarios where like UFOs, like you'll hear a lot also on Cosmic Disclosure or on those shows of people who kind of like come and talk about previous UFO crashes on Earth, and they back engineer things so that they can re-establish how that was created and then recreate it again. So I do think there's a lot of technology that we don't even know about, and I think biolocating us is something that possibly exists. Maybe it's really expensive and it's not just done, but I think that it's possible that we already have it on Earth. But I definitely know 100% that the aliens are able to do it. Not all races maybe, but a lot of them I think can. There was a whole section about the library. So if you guys don't know what the library is, you've heard Lorena and I probably talk about the Akashic Records. That's the library. At least for me, the library is the Akashic Records, where all the universal information is there. Every soul's information there. Everything, every country has information there. Every planet has information there. Like every race has information. Like everything is there. Everything is there. And so when they talk about the library, they're talking about the same thing, a place where all the information is stored. And this isn't the first hypnosis book that talks about it. I mean, if you go to Michael Newton books, the library is talked about. If you go to all these Dolores Cannon books, of course, and I'm sure there's many others that talk about the library. I don't know if I can't, off the top of my head, I can't think of another one right now, but there's a bunch of them to talk about the library from a hypnosis place, from a healing place, or from like a soul passing on and having some sort of experience and then coming back. So that to me is the library, the Akashic Records. And I loved it because they were talking about it in the book. There's a whole chapter about it. And what I found interesting was something that one of the hypnosis sessions she was describing, the individual was saying that they could either get the information, like almost like grab it like a book, right, in a way, or they can go into a specific room that projects it and they can like see it, and you can like I said, obtain the information faster, right? And I would agree with that as well, because I know that the Akashic Records, the way that I had received or understood the information when I first got the information from the Akashic Records was that the form of books is something that humans understand. And so it's a universal library. And for us, it's in form of books. But if we were to energetically tomorrow we pass away, energetically go there, it might look a little different. So we perceive things from the place the place where we are and the place we understand things. So that goes for everything in Akashic Records. Every time we try to get information, they're going to try to give you the information in a perspective so that you understand it. So sometimes there's things that they want to like explain and they have to simplify it because your human brain needs to like wrap its head around it. And so for us, it's a library and it's books. And I hope if tomorrow I'm not here anymore and I go, I hope I do find books because I love books. But there might be in other forms. But I do agree that they can be seen. Now, what I had understood was that the person can grab the book and it could be like pages of like a book, or it could it almost felt like to me like if it had a play button, and instead of like reading it per se, you'd be able to watch the scenarios that played out. So like, let's say that tomorrow I pass away and I say, ooh, I want to go see my soul's book in the Akashic Records. Now that I can go there energetically and stand there and like be more present with it. And I'll grab the book and I feel like I can either read it like a book or press that play button and see the past life or Lucia's life and how it played out and watch the scenarios play out, almost like a movie in a way, right? So I knew that was a thing. I found it interesting for this individual in their hypnosis session. For them, they go into a specific room and then it's like on the wall or something. So whichever it is, it seems to be a scenario where somehow the 5-dimensional place that is the Akashic Record somehow is able to play that movie for you and not just give you the information from a book form in a way. And then I wrote down, there are aliens that seem to have come on Earth to take plants and minerals from here. And then they seem to genetically modify these plants and minerals to put it into their own environment, their own planets. And I thought that was super interesting because that just goes to show you how they always talk about that we have a really rich planet. We have a really rich environment, that there's so much different life forms on here. And that includes plants, the amount of plants we have and how many interesting kind of species we have that they might not have. And so they're able to take those, but it wouldn't survive in their environment. So they have to genetically engineer the plant into whatever form it needs to survive in their atmosphere and in their planet. I thought it was really cool because sometimes we take for granted everything that grows around us. And the Akashic Records always say like, this is it's like is a cesspool. Is that a negative word? I'm gonna say like a cesspool, but I think it's a negative word. This is like a massive like pool of so many different creatures, beings, plants. And we have other races. We don't just have humans here. We just are not aware of them and we're not ready to see them really. But we have so much going on that we don't even know about. There's so much diversity. Okay, that's a word, diversity. There's so much diversity that we take that for granted. Like not every planet has that. We are really, really rich in those things. And we need to kind of come to grips with that and like remember like how lucky we are to have all those things. And for every sickness, there's a plant that cures that. The Akashic Records always, said that Mother Nature is super smart, and those weeds, those plants that overtake and overgrow in areas is because that area needs that. So people should be consuming that instead of being like, these weeds and like pulling them out, right? I'm not saying don't make your garden look nice, but it's interesting that Mother Nature knows better than we do, and we sometimes don't even like wake up to it. And then I got to a section where I was like, yes, because I've talked about Atlantis before and how a lot of us reincarnated again and we're connected to the Lenten times. And they talked about in the book at some point, the Lenten crystals that were in the era of Atlantis. The Lenten people knew, like they worked with crystals, they knew the power of crystals and they utilized it. Like we're just getting into the beginning of crystals in our era now again, right? Like we don't even know how to fully use them to the amount that the Lentens were able to use them. And so Lentens knew that they were so important. It seems like aliens and Atlanteans from this book, it seems like aliens and Atlanteans had contact with each other to the point where they had trading and they were trading these crystals. And that's so interesting. Like from the moment that, the Lenten had their whole scenario, right? where like the wave and the destruction and then, you know, the falling of that error. Back then they were communicating directly with aliens. They knew that aliens existed. Not only that, they had open trades with them to their convenience. They were probably receiving things and they were giving things, right? Trade. And now fast forward to where we are, and we're back to like square one, where it's like most people don't even believe that aliens exist, and most people haven't even been able to, those that do believe have not been able to confirm it yet, right? Yet go back in time in history, and supposedly the Atlanteans were trading. Of course, this is on the history books, which is one of the problems, of course, history books not being able to tell you, either because the information's not there, the information was lost, or it was covered up. Who knows which one it is? But we don't have access to like the full-blown historical truth of Earth, which could give us power for ourselves, empower us, each individual. So information is power. So I think these books are really interesting because you can grab tidbits of information that you might have not known and use it to your advantage to empower yourself, right? And then it says, the other thing I jotted down, it says races that are coming here, that races are coming here, and we're coming here to work with Earth and seeding Earth. So they used the word seeding, and I went, ooh, the Akashic Records had made me channel quite a few times about how Earth had to be reseeded. They said they reseeded quite a few times. So seeded and then reseeded quite a few times. So when they use the word seeding, I said, that's the exact word the Akashic Records had used. And I thought that was super interesting. And what I also jotted down next to this was like, I asked myself, Anunnaki ? Because I know that there's the Sumerian tablets, which I've talked about before in another book talk. The Sumerian tablets talk about how the Sumerian gods were actually other beings. Maybe they were the Anunnaki, whatever race it was. They came here and they seem to have helped create humans in the form that we are now. So they either seeded us, or they manipulated genes, or tweaked things, changed things up. Who knows exactly what that was, but the word seeding to me was really interesting, and for me it was a confirmation of what the Akashic Records had once said to me about the seeding and the reseeding of Earth. So it seems like the races that seeded Earth, this is another note I took. It seems like the races that seeded Earth stay near Earth to be able to like watch us, right? To keep an eye on their children or their, you know, the work that they've been doing. So it seems like they pick bases like the Moon, Saturn, or Jupiter. And then I wrote down in parentheses for my side notes. That's what the book says, that they came to Earth. They've seeded Earth, more than one race. They came to Earth, they seeded Earth, and then they stay nearby to be able to watch us. And so they're staying in bases. So it's not their original home. They create bases in these secondary homes that's either on the Moon, Saturn, or Jupiter. And then what I wrote down here is Moon and Sun, because I once asked the Akashic Records, and I did get a confirmation that there were bases, alien bases on the Moon of other races. Of course, I was asking about that, and I did get confirmation that it was true, but that they were kind of, I felt like they were not there anymore, like they were leaving, or it was no longer convenient to be there. So I'm not sure exactly what played out there, or why, what scenario, but I had heard about the Moon. And then the other thing I found interesting was I watched quite a few videos of people like zooming into like the sun images, and you see things shooting out, which is not those like ring of fire things, kind of like you see what looks like beings or spaceships or something. I had heard the theory, so this is not Akashic Records, but I had heard theories where like some spaceships from other races use the sun as like a charging station, almost like you charge your phone, right? Like it's a charging station. And some of them somehow go in to charge and come out. So I thought that was interesting, because if they're staying in places like Jupiter and the sun and the Moon, they're nearby, Moon, Saturn, and Jupiter. I found it interesting that I knew that the Moon was a scenario. So that was a confirmation for me. But I also had a suspicion, I don't know, I had a suspicion that the sun was like a charging station, which is pretty close, close by for them to do that. So the moon, definitely, that for me was confirmation. I don't know about Saturn and Jupiter, but hey, I wouldn't discard it, right? They can probably create atmospheres and bases that is like comfortable to live. And we have to remember that they don't have to have oxygen like the way we need to, or they don't have to have these typical scenarios playing out for them to be able to survive. Like their bodies function different, their food system is different. Some of them don't eat food like we do. So there's scenarios that need to kind of be present for them, or environment that need to be present for them to survive is different from ours. So maybe they can be on Saturn and Jupiter. We don't know. And oh, look, I jotted down they used to be on the moon. I don't even remember this. Oh, that was my notes from later. I jotted down that I knew that they used to be on the moon. Okay, yes. I missed that last note there. I wanted to make sure that I talked to you guys about that because it was a massive confirmation. Like the moon base is like, it's like right there. The theory is, aside from the Akashic Records information I got, the theory that I had also heard was that we don't see what do you call it? The dark side of the moon, I think they call it. Like the other side of the moon, like, why don't we ever see it? Like, I remember there were people asking about that, right? Like, why don't we ever see it? Like, is there something that like we can't see? And I did hear that that's kind of like, if there were bases, it would be less visible to humans. So of course, why wouldn't they pick the side of the moon that we're not able to kind of access and see, right? So that would make sense as well. The dark side of the moon and these bases and beings being closer. I think that was she calling them watchers in the book? I didn't jot that down. I think that you're calling them watchers. So I talked about this in the beginning of the first episode of this book, that they were kind of watching us and checking in on us. And I originally thought that it was a bad idea, and now she made me think twice about like, well, I mean, if you have your work there and you feel a little bit responsible for that, then if it's from a good place, then I kind of understand that they'd be watching us and feeling like they're a bit responsible and they can, I don't know, intervene a little bit. So she made me kind of open up to that a little bit, but at the same time, it's like having a child. I think it's like having a child. Like you have a child and you take care of the child till the child is like legally 18. And then you got to let them spread their wings. Like, what are you going to do? You can't tell them for the rest of their life what's wrong and what's right. They become their own individual. So it's almost like a father-child thing. But it's really weird because some of them consider us their ancestors. Like they consider us descendants. So it's like this really weird energy. Like, are we children for them or are we ancestors for them? Like, what are we, right? Are we their descendants or are we their... So it's really weird. I think the descendants one is more for like the hybrid, because the hybrid children are humans with grays, for example, and humans with whatever other races they're mixing. And these hybrid children will live, which I don't know where they live, but they're living somewhere, obviously. We are their parents and their ancestors with the grays as well, or with whatever race it is. So there is this like weird energy between us and them that we're not even aware of, but they are, that like we're ancestors and we're parents and we're children. And like, you know, it's just this whole thing. It's such an interesting world. Like if you think about it, it's like an interesting world that one day hopefully will come to light in our lifetime, so we can kind of like analyze it more and kind of be in awe of it. But till then, it's kind of like, let's figure out how it is through Akashic Records and hypnosis, because there's nowhere else we get that information right now, unless tomorrow, I don't know, there's disclosure and there's a positive disclosure or not manipulated disclosure, then that would be great. So we'll see. But there's quite a few cases that feel a little scary to read about. You're like, oh my gosh, that person went through that scenario. And there's quite a few cases where like, oh, it doesn't sound so bad actually. So I think you got a little bit of everything. And I think that we have to remember, not every human is good and not every human is bad. And this goes the same with like every race in the world. Like not every gray is bad and not every gray is good. Not every mantis is good and not every mantis is bad. So I guess we kind of need to understand that there's going to be bad experiences we might hear about, and there's going to be good experiences we might hear about. So yeah, they're individuals like we are. Hope you guys enjoyed that. And I'll be back with you again with another book talk. And again, if you have any suggestions or any proposals for any books that you're kind of hoping to hear about or want me to kind of look into, don't be afraid to connect with us. And we would love to look into that, or I would love to look into that. I'm so used to talking about the podcast with Lorena. I would love to like look into whatever book you guys find interesting, and if it's up my alley, I'm all in. Bye guys.